Okay, welcome to the MSDW Podcast. I'm Jason Gumpert, editor at msdynamicsworld.com. Today, we are here for a chat all about the launch of Dynamics 365 Business Central. I have two guests at the moment. If we're lucky, we may get a third later. But for now, let me welcome my guests. Today, I have first-time visitor to the podcast, first time maybe to any podcast. He's a Microsoft MVP, Ansari. Welcome to the podcast. Thanks for joining me today.
Thank you, Jason.
My other guest is Rod O'Connor, founder of BriWare Solutions and a returning guest now. Rod, welcome back. Glad to have you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me back.
All right. So I wanted to make today's discussion all about Dynamics 365 Business Central. We're recording this right after the product reached general availability following what has been a pretty attention-grabbing sort of run up, I guess you'd call it, with the big reveal a few weeks back, and plenty of you might call it heated discussion or debate or candid opinions in that time, and lots of just thinking about what it really means for people like yourselves who work with Dynamics customers, and maybe for your own businesses and for the partner channel overall, and for Microsoft. And I wanted to maybe dig into a few of those questions. It's a topic that I think there's lots to potentially discuss here. So I thought maybe to break things up, we'd maybe talk about a couple of stages. So going back to the stage where the reveal of Business Central was made, we learned about the name, we learned about the pricing and positioning. And I think the first thing that really got people talking was, the name and the brand, Dynamics 365 Business Central. AJ, maybe I'll start with you. What was your first reaction when you heard about the new offering and how it would sort of be, how it would be branded and how it would be represented in the market?
Well, I think for a long time, anybody who's been around Dynamics Nav was hoping that there would be some continuation of that brand, right? Globally, the brand or the incarnation of Nav, coming from Navision, you expected that to continue because that had instant recognition in the marketplace. And I think for a long time, we were hoping there'd be some element of Dynamics 365 and maybe something from the Nav heritage that would come together to get the name for this final product, because we knew that by later this year or sometime in 2019, Dynamics Nav as we knew it would also go away, and we'd end up with this one collective product with the SaaS and on-prem offering and options. So probably that was it was a little how do you say, from a point of view of nostalgia, I think it was a little sad to see that the name wasn't there. And then the other part was just, is Business Central going to resonate amongst the users, amongst the international users, partners, prospects? Is it too generic a name? Will people be able to quickly identify that this is a specific solution, or is Business Central just so generic that it won't strike a chord? Will this product struggle to establish itself as a brand that is universally known or instantly recognized amongst clients, customers, prospects, partners? So I think there's some of that confusion. And if you read some of the I think comments that day that came out, and I ended up writing a blog post on MSW on that, it was exactly around that topic. I think we have to address some of those concerns, and I think some valid concerns on all sides.
Rod, you're coming at this from a different perspective, and just to maybe you can give a little bit more background about the because you're not, and AJ, as you were saying, you have a long history with Nav and its heritage. Rod, you kind of approach it from a different perspective, right?
Yeah, I mean, coming from GP, I can totally understand the hopes of the Nav partners and the Nav community. To keep Nav in the name, as it were. From my perspective, I was just really glad they kept it in I'm going to say the Dynamics 365 brand. Last year at Directions, when they were talking about, the brand is dead, it's not Business Edition anymore, and everybody was kind of not sure what to call it. Frankly, I, as a partner, was concerned that they were going to take it out of the 365 brand altogether. Which would have been a shame, because I think 365 as a brand is a really cool concept, and kind of keeping it all together. And I mean, it would be nice to have the names be a little bit more descriptive or a little bit different, but having it all there as one brand and everything working together. AJ, your blog post actually did a really good job of conveying that idea that if we keep this product as part of that brand, an IT manager who's already working with Office 365 and Microsoft 365 is going to be more inclined to deal with a 365 branded product than something that's not within that brand. So from my perspective, yeah, it's a little sad to see the NAV go. But NAV is no more descriptive than Business Central, if we're going to look at it that way. So, yeah, I mean, that's kind of where I was coming from.
Hey, you make a very fair point. NAV is no more descriptive than Business Central is. I think it's all about nostalgia. It's all about just, I think, the emotional attachment that partners like myself have had with the name. So we have to take that for what it's worth. It's really not an objective way, I guess, to think.
Yeah, my hope, and I think one of the things that I always, whenever I read anyone comment on naming of Dynamics 365 products, is critique of the complexity of the naming, and this I think brings simplicity to naming for one chunk of the suite of offerings, of the suite of cloud offerings. So after I kind of for me, let the name sink in, I thought, okay, I like the simplicity of it, and I think it does make the at least this component of what Dynamics 365 is going to be as an offering. I think it makes it very easy to account for in a sense that you know what that is and what it's not. And so my take was probably probably not a bad move. It's not a wild name. It's not a wow kind of a name. But I honestly don't know who. I wouldn't have expected that. Coming from a massive corporation, they don't come up with really exciting names all the time. They come up with kind of sensible, safe names that they probably focus grouped and weighed against lots of others. And I think that's where this one ended up. But I kind of came away from it liking it.
I do think maybe there was a little bit more hoopla over the name change if all you were going to do was change one word from Business Central from Business Edition to Business Central. Probably we didn't need to wait as long as we did, but I'm no marketing professional.
I'll add one thing to that point. That name was actually a lot longer, right? So it's Dynamics 365 for Finance and Operations Business Edition, one that was extremely wordy, and two, I think that caused an immense amount of confusion among prospective clients, people who didn't fully understand all the different things under the Dynamics 365 umbrella, and they would frequently confuse the Business Edition product for the Enterprise Edition, or think that one was a portion or a set of modules and the other was an extended set of modules, and that somehow they would all play together. So if anything, that Business Central renaming really just puts an end, a kibosh to that confusion.
I 100% agree with that. I do think they did get their name wicked too long. The Finance and Operations Business Edition was just too much. And how do you tweet that anyway?
I also found it to be an easy target for the disgruntled of the NAV community. I think it was an easy thing to sort of pick on if anyone who already had, let's say, grievances or criticisms. I mean, there's certainly real concerns if you're a marketer and you've invested in graphic design and you've invested in SEO and some of that might feel like it's being ripped out from you. I can certainly understand not being happy about that, but that was another thing I wanted to kind of touch on was just your impression of some of the I mean, you guys are both, one of the reasons I like having you on is you're both very constructive. You're not, everything's not all roses, but you both can really kind of represent your ideas in a sort of reasonable, civil way. What has your reaction been to some of the really strong negative voices that have been out there, sort of in the veteran, Dynamics channel community?
So I've been happy with some of the some of the, as you put it, more constructive views out there. Like AJ, that post you put out last week, I thought was great. The "What's in a Name" post. Unfortunately, there has been some misinformation spawned, and I'm not sure if it's because people are scared or upset or what have you. But as an example, a post came out earlier, I guess late last week, stating that GP and SL are switched into maintenance mode and have been for some time, which is really not true. And so I do think that some of the reaction is unfortunate. I think people should be a lot more excited at the prospect of this new product than they are upset at the status of the other products.
I'll try not to be very long-winded because I see this from so many different angles and so many different ways. I know the one that you're talking about, Rod. I think the post from a friend from the NAV channel, right? A former MVP. And I think he used the words, he did use the words maintenance, and he did kind of allude to it. But I think what he was really getting at here, I'm not trying to put my explanation or my translation, but this is something we as NAV partners, I think, have long felt. There are certain products in Microsoft's larger set of offerings that get more attention and are usually on the forefront of new feature addition. And then there are other products that continue to be there, and Microsoft evolves them and releases new versions and continues to add customers. But I think when you look closely, you find that those products are probably not getting, as much of the flash and the pizzazz and the new things that Microsoft is focused on. And I think maybe that's where he was really going in that. You see with the successor to Dynamics CRM or Dynamics 365 for Sales and Dynamics 365 Finance and Operations Enterprise Edition, they will always be on the forefront. And I think with Business Central, that's another product that's going to get a lot of the attention in the SMB space, and Microsoft's going to continue to evolve that product at the fastest pace with the most investment from the Power Suite applications or the AI type of tool sets, machine learning tools, and so on. Whereas products like GP, or if NAV had continued to exist as NAV or as Cell, would probably see a lot less of that development. And I think that's where he was going at. I think maybe there was a harsh choice of words in some places, and believe me, I think as NAV partners showed last year around fall when directions happened and a lot of hoopla happened around branding and so on. I fully understand if GP partners are being very protective of the product and its legacy and what it means in the marketplace. I'll go back to Jason's earlier question, which is how do you feel, right? And you have to be very constructive. You have to try to be as positive as you can. It's one thing to say that you disagree with a thing or an action that Microsoft is doing and you have a genuine concern, but it's another thing altogether to be the harbinger of doom and try to create FUD, right? Fear, uncertainty, and doubt in the very product that helps you gain your livelihood. Because while you as, in a room full of people who are very knowledgeable about the product may say something and everybody understands what you mean, even if you tend to use very extreme words. I think out in the marketplace, though, your prospects don't always understand the nuance behind what you're saying, and your prospects will get concerned. They will probably be dissuaded from considering your product in a close race against your competitors, and your competitors will pounce upon that. What's the best thing for a competitor? The very resellers, the very partners and the MVPs out in the space, who are supposed to be evangelists for this product, turning around and putting and just saying outright that this product is done. And you better believe that our competitors will run with that type of language. So I think that's where we have to really strike a careful balance. And every time you say something that can be critical, you also have to give Microsoft the benefit of the doubt, and you have to try to see it from the other side. And you have to try to see why maybe it's happening and how you can make the most of that situation. Because at the end of the day, the decisions are made, and we have to find the best way to live with those decisions. And as partners, I think we can either wallow in our concern and our dismay, or we can see how do we constructively move forward with this? How do we get the most out of it? How do we get our partner channel excited? Because our products have survived so long because of a healthy, thriving partner channel. It's really incumbent on all of us to continue to keep that channel healthy and viable.
Yeah, another thing I've always tried to keep in mind, and obviously I'm not coming at it from the same perspective as a lot of the readers of our site or others is that Microsoft tends to correct course if just sort of adjust course, I guess you would say, as they move forward with product plans. And the idea that things are set. There seems to be a lot of times a sense that a decision's been made and cast and things are set in stone. And so often these product launches end up changing course. I mean, I think I would almost argue that this is just one more course correction, in the last 3 years, to get to Business Central.
Absolutely. And I'd say it's a good one. They do this all the time where they're coming out and they should. If they're coming out with something that was completely confusing for people, which it was, to change the branding, to change the product, to bring it in line with a really well-known and solid product, it just makes sense. It doesn't make sense to not change course.
Yeah.
So.
And Rod, I think at the beginning of the podcast, we were talking about product iteration. We were talking about Microsoft Surface devices, right? And kind of lovingly, and how I think you mentioned something along the lines of how they got it right the third time around with Surface Pro 3. And I think in the software world too, maybe it's not hardware iteration, but branding iteration, and maybe trying to decide in what space this product plays. There are a lot of different things that Microsoft or any large software publisher needs to iterate and reiterate before they hit the right balance. And I was educated recently by somebody about the time when Microsoft bought Great Plains and bought Navision and Exapta and all the products. And I knew for a while the products were called Microsoft Business Solutions, Navision, and so on, before they were called Microsoft Dynamics GP and Microsoft Dynamics Nav. What I didn't know is that apparently for a short time it was called Microsoft Great Plains Navision. And I was like, really? It was? And, if I understood this correctly, that's how it was called for a very short period of time. And to think that we recovered from that, clearly confusing naming convention to where we are today, where each product, GP, Nav, SL, they all are distinctly known in their own right for their own strengths. I think there's a lot of hope to be held out there that we'll get the naming right, even if Microsoft has to do one more round, if it takes that. The other part is, I think, this stream of thought as I'm saying this, it made me think too that Microsoft right now has an abundance of choices in the SMB space for products. Whether you look at Nav or you look at GP, you look at SL2 to some extent, they're all sitting in that same space. They have one product up top, which is Dynamics 365 for Finance and Operations Enterprise Edition. Right? I think that Enterprise Edition moniker is being dropped, so it's just Finance and Operations, the new name for AX. But they never really had anything at the entry level, the QuickBooks space, or for people who are just coming off of QuickBooks. And I think in some ways, Microsoft's also just trying to take the products that they have and fit something in that space, because there's a lot of market and a lot of space, a lot of business to be had. But we as partners maybe are just very resistive because that's not where the revenue is, not at the scale and size that we got from selling Nav and GP over these years.
So I think maybe that's one area where you and I both agree and differ. I do think that this product fits really nicely into that space. And the key differentiator, I feel, it's easy to implement the same way that QuickBooks would be. But QuickBooks doesn't grow with your business. Whereas I feel this product truly can, especially now that they've achieved that parity with Nav. We can start them off simple and start them off small and give them all of that cool stuff, but then grow with them and eventually get them into the more advanced manufacturing or the service or the, whatever else, or add on ISV solutions. My company's target audience is those small businesses. And we've walked away from deals in the past where GP just wasn't a fit. And that's kind of where I see this product for us, is that perfect fit of, entry-level accounting systems.
All right. We have another guest on the podcast today, Mark Polino. Hey, welcome, Mark.
Thanks, Jason.
Glad you could make it. For everyone on the listening in, Mark is the Director of Client Services at FastPath, and also someone who's been thinking a little bit about Business Central and its role in the Dynamics SMB offering space recently. So glad to have you with us. I wanted to ask another question. This was based on something around the general availability announcement that went out today, and Microsoft GM Marco Perisic in some of the one of the blog posts he wrote noted that, looking forward a little bit, so in the second half of 2018, there will not be a NAV 2018 R2. There will be basically a coming together of NAV and Business Central. So future versions of what had been NAV will become Business Central, but even for on-premises, it'll be available for self-deployment on-premises and in the intelligent edge. I'm not exactly sure what that means, for customers that prefer that option. So AJ, well, let me give this one to you first. I'll throw it open to the other two next. But what was your thought on sort of moving that availability of the on-premises version as Business Central maybe a little sooner?
Yeah, so I think just one of the things that we have long tried to struggle with or try to understand is where Microsoft was going with Dynamics NAV, right? Because we knew Dynamics 365 for Finance and Operations Business Edition was going to get the full capabilities, was going to get functional parity with Dynamics NAV, but what was that going to mean for Dynamics NAV itself? And I think what Mark talked about today should come as no surprise, because this was done with Dynamics AX before. And so I think this is the writing was on the wall all along. I think it's okay that Microsoft's not doing a 2018 R2. I know that was probably also received with some mixed feelings within the NAV community. The way I look at it is, as long as Microsoft's providing the features and the functions that are needed for GDPR and any other type of updates, we should be just fine. The end goal really is coming at the end of this year, when we'll end up with one major product. I think too that for anybody who is looking to purchase Dynamics NAV now, they can safely purchase it still, because by the time Dynamics NAV branding drops off and everything becomes Business Central, Business Central, in the cloud or Business Central hosted, you'd probably still be able to continue with Dynamics NAV for another year or two before you decide you want to move in that direction. So I doubt that that's going to be a big decision factor. I don't think that customers should really stop and worry about that so much. You talked about the intelligent edge too. I was thinking about what that other point was. I think what Mark's alluding to over there is that there are customers who are in the cloud and everything is online and internet facing, and then there are customers who like to deploy everything on premise and they like to keep things outside of the purview of the cloud, right? So completely secluded from the outside internet. But then now increasingly we're seeing customers who have an on-premise deployment, but that is open and available to access from cloud-based applications like Power BI, like Microsoft Flow, and so on. So they're on the intelligent edge. They can interface with cloud apps, and they can interface with some of the newer technologies, even if it's not a full SaaS deployment. That is my understanding. I've heard him say that a few times, and the way he's generally talked about it, that's the understanding I've walked away with. But I could be off.
That sounds pretty reasonable to me. Mark, let me get your perspective. You come in with obviously a deep GP background, as many people know, but in your work now, you're obviously interfacing with a lot of products. You seem to have done a little bit of thought about sort of where Business Central falls sort of relative to its competitors out in the landscape. When you hear about a unified Business Central coming sooner, a Business Central brand, I guess I should say, coming sooner rather than later, what are your impressions in terms of where it's going to sit out there compared to its cloud competitors?
So on one level, I'm really happy that it's coming. I'm happy that they're putting them together. There was some concern last year when Microsoft was very heavily focused on Dynamics 365 for Finance and Operations, the successor to Dynamics AX. There were a lot of questions as to whether or not Microsoft really wanted to be in the mid-market. I think Business Central having full NAV functionality and options for on-premise and in the cloud really helps answer that question. So I think that's an important thing for Microsoft to do. I think there's still going to be some questions around on-premise at some point, because there are things in the cloud that you simply cannot do just not going to be allowed to do. We've seen both. We've seen all of Dynamics 365 ERP development move that way, where there are certain things that are just walled off. You're not allowed to change source code. Microsoft is requiring extensions and those types of things. It'll be interesting to see how much of that trickles down into on-premise as well to provide a unified product versus maybe some differences between an on-premise product and a cloud environment. But I think there are some pretty strong cloud competitors out there, and Microsoft is going to have to make sure that what they deliver will stand up to that. I'm a little disappointed, and it's with a GP background, certainly we both appreciate Nav as another Microsoft product and compete with it periodically, but I'm still a little disappointed to see the Nav name disappear. There's certainly nothing inherently wrong with it. It's a huge brand with lots of value. And I'm just a little disappointed to see Microsoft throwing away some of these brands that they've purchased along the way.
Well, let me throw this one open to other people, because one of the things I'm wondering about is, what partners, what customers will see in this offering. And I'm talking about specifically sort of new customers. Do you have any other sense of what they'll take away from it, or maybe how they'll respond, maybe in comparison to how and maybe that ties into how partners actually represent it. Do you think partners are going to have, enough enthusiasm to really sell this as the next generation of Microsoft's business solutions? If they find the Nav, the loss of the Nav brand disheartening. Well, Rob, why don't I put this one to you first?
Yeah, I mean, from my perspective, I think you're exactly right. It's going to be up to the partners to deliver this product and to really build that enthusiasm. New customers aren't, sure, Nav is recognizable, and there's a lot of Nav articles out there. There's a lot of Nav everything out there. But new customers, I don't think are going to be that attached to the name. It's going to be up to the partners to drive that excitement. To get out there and show them how cool this product is and what it does and why they should be interested in it. And eventually, it'll be just like when the Vision turned into Nav. It's just something that everyone will get used to, and they'll move past and they'll move on, and they'll know that older documentation refers to this Nav product that we don't use anymore as a name.
Rod, I actually just want to ask you one quick follow-up, because I believe, let me ask you first. So you were at the GPUG Amplify event a couple weeks ago, right?
Yes, I was.
And I asked because I thought I had seen that you were presenting on the Business Central topic too, and I was curious what the reaction of the GP audience was to some of your findings.
So my focus in that session, I actually did two sessions. One was very partner-centric, so it was on the partner day, and one was a customer session. And the customer session in particular was called, "Should I be considering Dynamics 365?" And I didn't put Business Central in the title on purpose. My focus on that was Dynamics 365 as a brand. And what I'm finding is that our bias, even on this call, we're talking about Business Central in particular. But whether or not a client chooses Business Central, Dynamics 365 as a brand is still a really cool concept. There's still a lot of really good stuff coming out. And even if you're including Nav or GP as that kind of ERP core, there's still a lot of Dynamics 365 that you can build around that. And the concepts of Dynamics 365. AJ talked about, Power BI earlier, or Flow, or any of those other things. You can still fit those in, even if GP is your core ERP. And that was my focus. When you put it in that perspective, a lot of people were actually pretty happy, right? We've talked a lot about the confusion in the industry. There has been a lot of confusion about is GP going away. And for those GP customers to know that the product isn't going away was kind of a relief. And it allowed them to actually look at Dynamics 365 as a brand and actually consider it for their future, as opposed to actually, writing it off because it's big and it's scary and it's not GP.
All right, excellent. Well, let me put this to all of you. Sort of what comes next for Business Central? I was thinking today, and there's in terms of the conference schedule, there's obviously a new event coming in the summer. There's Microsoft events in the summer and the fall, but I don't think there's really. I'm trying to think of sort of what's next for Business Central in the space. What are existing Dynamics SMB customers going to be seeing next? What are prospects out in the marketplace going to be seeing next? What events will it be showing up at? I know it won't be showing up, and I noted this in an article today. It won't be showing up at, as far as I know, at the Summit EMEA event, which is going to really be, I guess, enterprise focused, AX and CRM related product stuff there. But yeah, what is next for it? AJ, do you have a sense?
So it'll definitely be there on the NAVUG Summit circuit, right? So I serve on the board of advisors for NAVUG, and kind of having a bit of a discussion around Business Central. If you go on navug.com today, you're going to see it's already been co-branded to BCUG/NAVUG. So NAVUG's running full steam. They're trying to embrace new people who come to the community, and it's going to be part of the Summit flagship conference. And at the Focus conference that's going to happen in about a month and a half, or in about a month now, there's also going to be some development and partner readiness type of content and academy classes. So NAVUG's running with it, and the flagship Dynamics Nav Partner Conference, Directions North America, is going to have quite a bit of content around Business Central and Nav as well. As a matter of fact, I think that probably happens right around the time where Microsoft may decide to merge the brands together. All we know at this point it'll happen it'll happen sometime in the fall. We don't quite have a date to go with it yet. I think in terms of customers, Microsoft will probably put up enough content, both marketing and business collateral, that will involve and I think give customers enough information to find on the product before they make a purchasing decision. I think they've been doing some good work there. I think, though, the partners will struggle a little bit. I was talking to somebody, I think, from the Redmond Channel Partner magazine, and I was telling Barb there that Microsoft didn't do such a fantastic job the first go around with Business Edition, or Finance and Operations Business Edition, in partner prep. They put some content out there, but I think it was helpful if you were a NAV partner, because there was some stuff that you were expected to know and you only really knew if you had that. But I don't think there was enough out there for partners who weren't doing any dynamics to come in, fully understand and become product experts, turn around and then deliver that solution. So I'm hoping that I think Microsoft does a little bit more to address those gaps. There was also some unlearning that partners had to do because this was a scaled down version of NAV at that point in time. But now I think with functional parity, that will go away. Before I think Mark and Rod answer, I want to touch back on one thing you were asking earlier, Jason, about partners and their willingness to sell Business Central as opposed to NAV or GP. There are a lot of things to be said. I think, Rod, you hit on some really solid points. But I think one factor is how account executives are compensated. I worry because I talk to a lot of AEs and salespeople in the channel. And the one thing I hear is my employer still compensates me primarily on a perpetual licensing model. And how am I going to be able to make my quotas, my targets? How am I going to retire those quotas if I'm now expected to sell a product that is heavily SaaS? With every passing year, we're getting more SaaS products and we're getting fewer perpetual license products. So if in about a year, NAV perpetual licensing goes away when it becomes Business Central, that is an if. I do not know that that's happening, but I have to imagine it will. And if we end up in a landscape where there's more SaaS products and fewer perpetual products, how do we afford to keep those account executives and the salespeople who have been very valuable in helping us grow our business? And are those people going to be resistant and sell the SaaS products? And what will that mean for the customers if the partners are unwilling to take that and lead with that product as opposed to the traditional stalwarts that are NAV and GP?
As a small business owner, I totally agree with that. It's really tough trying to pay salespeople in this model, trying to figure out a fair way, but to keep them motivated to sell this stuff.
Mark, as someone who looks across a lot of products these days, what's your response to that?
I think it'll get figured out. Microsoft is certainly pushing their incentives on the cloud model. At some point, the partners are going to make adjustments to make that happen. The big benefit that partners have today is they still have the option to continue selling on-premise. If they work really hard at it, and we've seen some partners who have done this with Nav and with some other products, certainly the folks previous AX and other products. The trick, as best I can tell, is to figure out how to blend your way into something new. Being able to leverage those on-premise sales that you've got and maintenance pieces that you've got to work your way into the cloud. I don't have any magic answers in terms of compensating folks, but I'm confident that folks will figure that out at some point in time.
All right, and I know there is a lot more thinking out there on this exact question. People doing some math, putting together different charts and scenarios. It's certainly a great point. Thanks for raising it. Well, I think we're going to start wrapping up. Thank you guys so much for sharing your perspective today. Hopefully we can reconnect after a little more has been said, and maybe some more of the chips have fallen on the release, and things start building some momentum. So, AJ, Rod, Mark, thank you very much for joining me today.
Thank you for inviting me. Appreciate it, Jason.
All right.
Yeah, thanks, Jason.
Thank you, Jason.
This has been another episode of the MSDW Podcast. My thanks to today's guests, AJ Ansari, Product Manager at InterDyn BMI, a Columbus global company, Rod O'Connor, founder of BriWare Solutions, and Mark Polino, Director of Client Services at FastPath. If you want to get in touch, send me an email, jgumpert@msdynamicsworld.com. Until next time, this is MS Dynamics World signing off.